First and foremost, welcome. We're glad you're here. I know it is an early morning, and at times it's hard to get on the facility at this time of day as well, and so we appreciate you showing up today and coming to learn with us on a journey that I think you'll appreciate over the next, actually, did you know this is going to go 6 hours and there'll be an exam as well? So this is your opportunity. If you're like Everett Faulkner sitting in the back row, you can slip out. But we are truly honored to have you here. My name is Brett Kaysen. I'm the Western Regional Business Director for Zoetis on the U.S. pork business, and I'm based out of Nunn, Colorado. It is my pleasure to serve today as your moderator for this session. Before joining Zoetis, I spent the majority of my professional career as an animal scientist, an educator in both extension, teaching, and research as a university professor, and I have the great honor of serving as a second term on the National Pork Board as well, which I'm very proud of, and it allows me the opportunity to see the industry through a different lens again. As someone who has spent the majority of their lifetime, all of his lifetime in swine production, as well as serving as an educator, it excites me to be a part of this educational seminar. We at Zoetis are pleased to sponsor today's speakers to address thoughts from farm to fork. And I'll say that again, from farm to fork. Healthy animals, healthy food, ultimately equals healthy people. We want you to think about that concept as you sit through this morning, and how can we bridge the gap between pork production and consumers' confidence in the pork they buy, the noble profession of raising food. Zoetis is the leading global animal health company, and our mission is to build on a 6-decade history and singular focus on animal health to bring customers exceptional products and services. Our entire team is committed to helping customers succeed in their businesses in this farm-to-fork mission. This is why we come to you today and provide this session. Our focus today will be on understanding the why, the understanding of the business, the understanding of the whole supply chain, and what it takes to get pork products from the farm to the retail case. Even if you work in the pork industry, we want to explore with you all the different aspects that go into raising pork, marketing pork, selling it to the consumer. And the majority of the U.S. population, as you know, is very far removed from animal agriculture and continues to deviate farther from that. And it's our opportunity today to engage you in a conversation on how we can bridge that gap. However, as they become farther and farther removed from the farm and our current production practices, they continue to get more and more excited about where their food comes from, and at times want to become food experts. And sometimes where they find that source of information can be questioned in terms of the facts behind it. Our main goal today is to provide information that will better inform you, your farm employees and family members, and friends about producing quality pork products and understanding today's very intricate, detailed, and at times complex marketplace. To help us with the discussion, we're very fortunate to have on the panel with us today several people that I know personally and have a lot of respect for, and Dr. Justin Ransom, friend first and foremost, and respected professional, is a supply chain strategist who has expertise in animal and food production systems. He is the former Senior Director of Quality Systems for the U.S. supply chain at McDonald. So as you're thinking about questions, think about what he did and who he served in the past. He will be sharing how companies like McDonald's use consumer insights to manage food sourcing and brand marketing strategies. Also with us is Dr. Carissa Odland, a veterinarian with Pipestone Veterinary Services and Pipestone Systems in Minnesota. Dr. Odland will discuss how Pipestone incorporates expert animal care into their production management programs and how this approach positively impacts pig health. She'll also share how she reaches out to customers and the general public using social media, key, social media, and how to answer their questions about pork production through that venue. And finally, Dr. Tamika Sims, Director of Food Technology Communications for the International Food Information Council and Foundation, will share evidence about consumer food trends from their organization's annual consumer survey. She will touch on where today's consumers tend to get their information about food. I'm very interested, which I'm sure you'll find very interesting as well. Each of our panelists today will spend 15 to 20 minutes on the information that they've elected to present. At the end of the trio's presentations, then we will have a 15-minute to 20-minute question and answer period, which I would encourage you to start thinking about those at this point in time. So, at this point in time, I would like to ask Dr. Justin Ransom to start us off. I think down is up, but you can use the arrow key if you can. Thanks, Brett.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to Zoetis for inviting me to spend some time with you this morning. I love being in pork country. I love spending time with producers. Growing up in production agriculture in North Texas, certainly I understand a lot of the challenges you face. I had worked with the long-legged, four-legged ones years ago, and admittedly I've been in Chicago and Washington, D.C. for quite a while. But I'm looking forward to the day when I get back into production ag, and hopefully that's going to be sooner rather than later. What I'm going to share with you today is just a little bit about some of the things that we went through over the last 5 years, or some of the things that I went through over the last 5 years at McDonald's, and more importantly, how I'm trying to use that information to better equip others about how we're talking about food and some of the challenges that we face. This here is just is actually my resume put up in a word cloud. And obviously, I've got a lot of passion about food. But it's really about, for the last 20 years, I've been trying to be an animal scientist, someone that is protecting the food supply. I saw my job as an animal scientist as how do we raise animals bigger, safer, better? How do we protect the food supply in every way that we can? And that was my job as a professional. And so I really viewed the world that way for most of that 20 years, as that was what I was supposed to do. No one really needed to worry about food safety because that's what I was trained to manage and protect in supply chains. And so what was really interesting to me was when I was at McDonald's, just for perspective, 2% of the population is in agriculture. That's what we say. Well, if you look at supply chains, about 2% of the population of people in supply chains actually come from farms. So of the 100 people in McDonald's supply chain, there's only 2 of us that came from farms. And so whenever you try to extrapolate that about how we're making decisions in some of these big businesses, it becomes difficult to explain to others how important it is that we can be effective at communicating our message. So here I found myself as an animal scientist, a food scientist, microbiologist, trying to explain to marketing and communications people, we don't need to worry about X, Y, and Z. I've got that covered. And then they're like, okay, let me show you something. And so we went and spent a lot of time in looking at consumer and business insights data. We looked at what the competitors were doing on the market and the horizon, and really, and literally setting in roundtable discussions with consumers, and really it was an eye-opening experience. They didn't know that my job of protecting the food supply even existed. And that's why part of the reason why they've had so much question and concern about food and where food is coming from. And it begins to kind of tell a narrative of there's the disconnect that Brett brought up just a second ago that we've got to figure out how to connect. I don't have that many slides, but what I'm going to do is basically share with you how that disconnect kind of happened and how consumers have grown to have so much control in this conversation around food. And it's something I think it's pretty interesting, and I hope you enjoy. So I'm going to go back in time a little bit, and this is some work put together by Forrester Research. And it's really a concept of how consumerism came about. And if you look at the age of modern history, you go back to the age of manufacturing, obviously Ford, John Deere, GE, Boeing, they figured out how can we create factories and put parts together to make a thing, a truck, a tractor, whatever it would be, send it down the assembly line and get it out the door. Okay? They really figured out the age of manufacturing when putting things together. And then the age of distribution supported that age of manufacturing, and so all these things, all these goods that we had, were able to ship across the country. and ultimately able to ship around the world. So really, the age of distribution, we have, Procter & Gamble. Walmart is the best in the world at distribution, one of the best. McDonald's was good. Apple was good in today's times. But the ability to move goods and services across the world was incredibly important. And then, fortunately, Al Gore invented the Internet, and the age of information boomed. And it's really how it connected supply chains. It connected people in a way that they'd never seen before. And so you could almost just think, I need this, and almost it shows up at your door, right? And so the ability to move things more efficiently, faster, better, has really drawn so much in terms of business, especially in the last 20 years. Obviously, Amazon is killing it in that market space. Google, others are really figuring out how do we use information to get it to the right people at the right time, whether that it's just information or we're actually moving goods and services. So in 2010, we kind of had a tipping point moment. Can anyone think in your mind, like, what in 2010 was so unique that we probably hadn't seen ever before? In around 2010, what did everybody have in their pocket? They had all the information in the world, right? So they have cell phones. They have smartphones. Smart technology. They have all this information in their pocket they've never had before in their life. And then you have this generation of people that don't really know anything but what comes out of their phone. And by the way, they have access to it 24/7. So that really changed the way in what Forrester is describing as the age of the customer. And it really empowers buyers to demand a whole new level of expectations of what it's purchasing. And there's some companies out there that are doing a remarkably good job at it, and I think everybody else is trying to figure it out and catch up. I think you look at Macy's, American Express, Chick-fil-A, those are just some examples. Southwest Airlines is another great example of companies that have figured out how do we be customer obsessed, okay? How do we figure out how to get whatever the customer wants, and we're going to give it to them? And so it's really creating this whole new dynamic in people's minds that they can get whatever they want if they just go and ask for it and drive for it. And you might ask, well, how is this possible? A famous marketer, Scott Cook, says a brand is no longer what we tell the consumer it is. It's what the consumers tell each other it is. What is that? We call it user-generated content. It's the ability of people to be able to connect with each other in a way like they have never been able to connect before. Before we had the internet, there was a very simple and clear way that we communicated with each other. And it was through media at one point was held accountable to a standard of sharing information, and it was very linear. It was fact-checked, it was relatively accurate, and it was linear, right? There was no sharing these crazy stories. In today's new world, you don't know what is real and what is not real. There's things that pop up on your Facebook page or your Twitter account, and you don't know if it's real news or fake news. Some of it, they're specifically trying to fool you in some of it. And so consumers are so confused with the information that is out there, and there's so many mixed messages, it kind of gets out of control. And so if you break it down like this, prior to 2010, the age of the seller had the sellers, the people selling goods and services, bringing, whether it's pigs or computers or whatever it is to market, the seller had all the control, most of the control, okay? What is the product I'm going to bring? What does it mean to me? This is what I want to bring to market, and I'm going to sell it. And I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know about that product. And then the buyer, they got to decide, do I want this or not? Do I want to price shop it? they didn't really have that much control in the conversation. But with smartphones, with all this information that's out there, with misinformation that's out there, and the age of the customer, everything completely changed. It changed in a way that really we've never been able to see before, because the customer really does have an amazing amount of control. I don't know if you remember basically it was early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. I remember being in grad school and sitting at a computer. I was like, God, I hate this. This is the worst computer ever. I'm going to go build my own computer that's fast, right? So you could go to the Dell website and you could pick everything that you wanted, right? You could pick you could pick the processor speed, you could pick the memory, you could pick what kind of processor it was, and you could get exactly what you wanted. And then, what happens? Well, your next door neighbor, your buddy, says, oh, well, I'm going to get something faster and better because I'm going to use this other kind of processor. And it becomes this thing where you're building your own computer, right? You extrapolate that into food. You go into a Subway line or Chipotle line. You're building your own food. It's yours. It's your identity. And so people they're more engaged in the process whenever they're part of the creation of the product that they're making, right? So the buyers are producing the product information. And then they're talking about it on social media. They're talking about, I've got the fastest computer. I've got the best X, Y, and Z, the fastest car, whatever it is. And so they're building this product. They're building the product that they want. They're talking about it on social media. And then they're price shopping the heck out of it. They are still price shopping. You're like, it's not fair. You got everything you want. Why do you have to beat me down on price? And so it's really created an interesting dynamic that we face today, is how do we figure out, how do we own more of that conversation? And how do we try to control that? And it's really, it's a really interesting dilemma. And I think one of the first things that I would say is that we have to focus on the positives. I am the first to tell you that I love the rich heritage that we have in production agriculture, American agriculture, apple pie, and baseball. I love that. And we've got to get back to more of that and figure out how do we talk about that differently. I thought I had a slide in here. I guess it's removed. But it talks about so many times when we go to have conversations, we talk in facts, right? We talk in facts, and really we miss the mark in terms of our audience. Because what our audience wants to hear is an emotional connection to us or the products they're buying. And we talk in, the Group House Sow thing is a great example, okay? They have to, the activists have to show a picture of a sow in a stall. We show a table of digits that say there's no difference. They're equally as happy. These are the facts. But they can't associate with facts. They're hung up on emotions. So when we talk about pharmaceuticals, it's the same exact thing. We're talking in facts. But what we need to do is be talking in emotions. We raise healthy baby pigs. We work to prevent the need to treat pigs with pharmaceuticals. In fact, last year we reduced pharmaceuticals by X amount. Those are the kinds of messages that we need to continue to figure out how to say. And each of you, regardless of your role in the industry, needs to be equipped with being able to talk about that. Whether you're at church at Sunday, or whether it's your bar Saturday night, whether you're PTA on Wednesday night, you need to be able to have this information ready and available. And you just need to change your vernacular, the way you talk about what you do. That's hard to say, I realize. But that's the reality of the situation, that as the 2% of the population, we've got to get our word out. And I think that other people are going to talk about it a little bit more. I'll end with this slide, and I think it's important because it really sets the trajectory for how, in my mind, the industry, the animal agriculture industry, not just the pork industry, we've got to figure out what the faster horses look like. Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said, we want faster horses. We want horses that can run longer. And the reality of it is, he could see farther into the future that there was something different. And I think the future of agriculture, animal production, all these issues that we face in terms of connecting with consumers, we have to be able to tell a different story. We can't necessarily do things the way that we've always done them. We don't have to scrap everything. It's really about how do we articulate a new message and go out with it, and that is what we are. Right? If people are always beating us up over one issue, it's like, maybe we should look at that issue, and is there a better way to do it? You know, in your mind, as a producer, there might not be. But in the minds of people who are buying your products, there is. And we'll get into some of the questions listening to the vocal minority in our Q&A.
That was an excellent presentation. So now I have the challenge of going after Justin. But I'll try to keep you all entertained, and hopefully you'll find the information interesting. So this is IFIC's 12th year in producing this food and health survey. And what we look at is consumer perceptions surrounding food and beverage purchases, diet and nutrition initiatives, and also choices they make in restaurants as well. So it's an online survey of about a little over 1,000 people, Americans, ages 18 to 80. And we have weighted results so that the results of the survey are representative of the American population. So something that may not be confusing or surprising, is that Americans are confused about food. So when they have to make a choice in a store or if they have to make a choice at a restaurant, they're not really feeling very confident in the choices that they make. And they're confused about the information that they get. So what we found is that Americans actually have a high trust in dietitians and health professionals. So a dietitian ranked number 1, and a healthcare professional was number 2. Number 3 was a counselor or coach, and number 4, a scientific study. Women actually have a greater trust in RDs and healthcare professionals, so they're driving that number up. But men have a higher trust in friends and family. And we can see here that friends and family rank pretty low on the list as far as trust goes. They're about number 8 down here. Now, when it comes down to who you trust and who you actually go to, we see that there's some differing information. A conversation with a healthcare professional still ranking very high, but friends and family rises up to number 2. So even though people have a trust in a professional, that's not actually the folks that they go to get information from. We called out here that 38% or almost 40% of millennials say families and friends are a top source of information for them, versus about 20% of boomers. So friends and family, number 2. So you can imagine that there's going to be some conflicting information that a consumer is going to receive as far as what a doctor may say or what a friend or family member may say. We dug down a little deeper and asked specifically about information on food safety. So I want you to take a look on the right-hand side of the screen here. Or, no, not the right. So the left. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that a news article or headline or a family and friend member would be the top 2 sources to get food safety information from. And on the other side of the screen, we kind of teased out that information further and looked at specific food safety issues and found what was the number 1 source for each issue. So for foodborne illness, the top source is a news article. News article is actually the top source for most of these. except for food additives and ingredients. Folks like to get information from a family or friend member. Allergens, family or friend member. Interestingly, for GMOs, you can see that folks rather read a scientific study. Another call out that I put here was that a food company or manufacturer ranks very low in where people get information about food safety. So we developed a bit of a heat map here to kind of put all that information together a little bit. And you can see that a healthcare professional in the top, my orientation's a little bit off, but in the top right-hand side, there's a high trust and common source section, and that's where a healthcare professional ranks. Down below that is friends and family, low trust, common source. Over to the left-hand side, there's like a cluster of dots here. So bloggers, a healthcare professional, food company, and so on. We thought it was interesting that the bloggers were kind of in this low-trust, uncommon source, when we know bloggers have a hefty influence on consumer attitudes about food and so on. But what I think a lot of consumers don't realize is that if they're reading something from a blogger, they think that they're often reading a news headline or something from a professional, a healthcare professional or a dietitian or so on. So they kind of lump those things in together, and of course that would mean the blogger would rise up to a higher trust and more of a common source. And RDs and our wellness coaches and scientific study are kind of in the middle of the road here. So the next section, we take a look at information to see where consumers like to shop, and when they're there, what influences their choices, their food and beverage purchase or their restaurant choice. So something that may not be surprising is that supermarkets are a #1 place for people to shop. Over 80% of consumers primarily shop at supermarkets. Following a supermarket is a superstore. Down at the very bottom, a drugstore. So we asked consumers, what out of these choices, which one has the most impact on your food and beverage purchase? So taste was by far #1. Next was price, and then healthfulness. You can see when we're looking at men versus women, women are more likely to say that taste, healthfulness, and sustainability matter. So it's our fellas that are kind of driving up the factor of price. So I didn't know that the guys would be the coupon clippers, but it seems that price is more important to men than to women. 55% of millennials say that convenience is a top driver. That may not be surprising. Millennials love convenience. Boomers are more likely to say taste matters to them. But our top 3 here are taste, price, and healthfulness. And this is something that we've seen from year to year. And I'll go into that in a little bit in my next slide. So here's a look at drivers from 2012 through 2017. And you can see that taste is at the very top, and it's kind of remained pretty steady for the past 5 years. Next is price in the green, and the yellow, healthfulness. What's interesting here is that this year, price and healthfulness have kind of lapsed over each other. So you can see that while they're both very high, consumers have more of a concern with healthfulness than they did last year, and it's kind of lapsing with price. And following that is convenience, and at the very bottom, sustainability. And my call out here says that 84% of consumers say that taste is the top driver for purchases, and only 35% say the same for brand choice. So I'm going to, in this next section, kind of touch on some information that Justin actually presented as well. And so we know that consumers are more concerned about where food comes from. They want to know more about food origin, food's journey. And so that has an impact on the choices that they make. So starting over here on the left side of the screen, you can see that more than 50% of consumers think that sustainability or food being produced in a sustainable way is important when they make their food and beverage choices or purchases. Looking on the other side of the screen, what you'll see is we ask those same consumers that said that it was important, what aspects of sustainability are the most important to you? Interestingly, the number one is pesticides. Number two, conserving a natural habitat. And then the third is conserving farmland over multiple generations. Again, we found that it was interesting at the very bottom was producing more food with the use of less natural resources, which is likely to be what a producer or industry would think would be number one when it comes to sustainability. And so this kind of gives you more of a clue on what's on consumers' minds when they think the word sustainability. I think sustainability can be seen as a very broad thing, but it depends on the company and what they're trying to achieve. So we ask consumers a little bit more about what impacts their purchases when they have to make a food and beverage purchase in a store. And we found that they would like to be able to recognize the ingredients on the package. They want to know where the food comes from. And then they also want to have ingredients, less ingredients. So they want a simplified product. Women are more likely to care about these factors than men. But what we thought also was interesting here was that knowing that the manufacturer shares their values, 30% of consumers said that that's something that's important to them. So we asked these same consumers a follow-up question as well. So we asked them, well, since you said that you wanted the manufacturer to share your values, what values are you talking about here? And we gave them some examples for food attributes. We listed things like healthy, natural, organic, non-GMO. You can see that was number one. Over 40% of consumers want the food attributes to have these types of characteristics. Company characteristics and values, they want the company to be a local business. They want it to be made in the USA. Environmental concerns were less than 20% cared about this, but they wanted products that were environmentally friendly, had less waste, recyclable packaging. But another thing here is that 20% of people, even though they said it, they wanted the manufacturer to share their values, didn't know what those values were. So, so people want more, but they're kind of fuzzy on what more is. So these same food values can impact restaurant choices as well. Knowing where the food comes from was number 2 for food and beverage purchases in a store, but it's risen to number 1 here. Knowing that the food contains only natural ingredients, and then understanding how the food is produced. Those are the top 3. So we called out here that 60% of those who regularly use nutrition info when eating out say it's important that the food contains only natural ingredients. You can see that the drivers here are not as strong as they were for the food and beverage purchases in the store, and that's because, especially in restaurants, there's not as much information to get from what's on the menu. But of course, in the store, you can read the label, you can take your time, you can shop down the aisle. But at a store, you get a restaurant, you get the menu, and you kind of just have to pick. But of course, a lot of times you're kind of picking based on a habit. People tend to go to the same restaurants habitually, and they just kind of know what they want, and they get the same things, that type of thing. So this slide has a lot of information on it, so just allow me to walk you through it a little bit. So on the left-hand side, we have our bars. The blue bars represent labels that impact food and beverage purchases in a store. And then the green bars represent labels that impact a purchase or choice at a restaurant. So the labeling choices here include no added hormones, natural, raised without antibiotics, and the list goes on. And you can see at the very top for the blue bars, food and beverage purchases at a store, no added hormones, natural, and raised without antibiotics are very high. For restaurants, the green bars, natural is number 1. Locally sourced is also reaching about 20% almost. But none of the above, almost 50% of consumers say that none of that matters to me when I'm in a restaurant. So we broke down this information a bit further by generation. So move over to the right-hand side of the screen here. And the green bars represent millennials, purple is Generation X, and then boomers. So we can see that millennials want natural products in the store and a restaurant. Generation X are looking for natural products in a store, more so than millennials, but they're very close together. For organic, millennials are leading, looking for organic products in a store and then also in a restaurant. You can see that Generation X and boomers, organic restaurant choices, they don't seem to care very much. And organic for products is higher, but certainly well behind millennials. So food confidence and concern. So we know that Americans have more of a concern with food safety, and they are concerned with being able to rely on the food supply. And something else that Justin highlighted is that you have a consumer that wants to know more about where their food comes from, and they also have a bit of a wavering aspect as far as what they trust as far as producers and sources for their purchases. So confidence in the food supply is slightly down. And these arrows, again, are representing basically a comparison from last year. So very confident is up, somewhat confident is down a bit, but over 50% of consumers are confident in our food supply. So that's pretty good news. And then we asked the consumers that said that they were confident, we asked a follow-up question, and I'll bring you over to the right-hand side of the screen. And we asked them, what are the most important food safety issues of today? Number 1, foodborne illness from bacteria. The second was carcinogens or cancer-causing chemicals from food. This is actually up slightly from last year. Chemicals in food. At the very bottom, GMOs, and then the presence of allergens. And GMOs have actually gone down since last year. So food safety concerns can alter eating habits. Over 40% of consumers said that they changed their eating habits based off a food safety concern. And looking at the chart over to the right-hand side of the screen, it pretty much mirrors what we saw on the last slide, was that foodborne illness from bacteria caused a change in eating habits, and it was a top safety concern of this a little over 40% of this survey sample. Carcinogens and chemicals in food. Biotechnology, GMOs, maybe 5% of people. And so you can see just a bit of a trend here of what is actually on consumers' minds as far as what they're most afraid of as far as food safety goes. And we asked this question specifically because of animal antibiotics and antibiotics resistance being in the news more so recently in the past couple of years. And so not too long ago, FDA issued a new rule in that it would not allow the use of antibiotics for growth promotion in animals, and that there will also be enhanced use of veterinarians for prescription of antibiotics. And so we wanted to know if this changed consumers' confidence in the vets and farmers to use antibiotics responsibly, and then also would it change their confidence in purchasing animal products. And what we can see is that a little over 40% of consumers have both a change in confidence as far as being more confident in antibiotics being used responsibly, and then also their purchasing of animal products. We see also that there's about 30% or so that have no change. So that's also interesting and could call for us to ask the same question next year and see where consumers' minds are as far as their ability to be more confident in the food supply and also in purchasing animal products. So if you wanted to see our survey in its entirety, it's much longer than this. But what I did was called out some information that I thought would be good for this audience in particular. You can go to our website and you can have full access to the survey, and it's free. So thank you.
All right. So just the way I think of this, I mean, Justin and Tamika shared a lot of really good information that emphasized that there is a disconnect between us on the food production side and consumers. And so my challenge right now will be to share with you just some very basic ways or examples of how, through my role at the Pipestone Vet Clinic and through producers that we work with, we've tried to work on earning trust with those consumers that we have just been talking about, right? And we do that kind of through two different ways. Number one, sharing our expert pig care, and then also by trying to be as transparent as possible about our passion for what we do. So at Pipestone, we wear many hats. I am a veterinarian, but I am also the director for animal welfare for all the sow farms that we manage, and we have several people that are involved in all the activities that we do. But no matter what hat we're wearing, we try to have our culture shine through, and our culture is directly related to the core values that we have at Pipestone. So I just thought a way for me to help kind of emphasize how we've been working towards earning trust, I would share with you guys the core values that we have and share with you how that has helped us in sharing this message. So our core values are integrity, caring, commitment, teamwork, and growth. And so in everything that we do, we strive to have integrity in our actions. And you can see that just from our mission statements, which is advancing animal care every day and helping the farmers today create the farms of tomorrow. Those aren't just mission statements that we say, but those are mission statements that we try to live by every day. And ultimately, I would say our roots are in providing veterinary services to farmers. But we do that by trying to help them confidently give the best animal care that we can, because that's critical, but then also assisting them in being sustainable. And part of being sustainable is us having that consumer trust. So how do we gain and then keep that consumer trust? I've already mentioned trying to live every day with integrity. But additionally, two of our other core values are caring and commitment. So being able to show and have a caring attitude, and then also being committed to the animals on our farms, and also being committed to our families. So we try to live this out by opening our hearts, opening our doors, and just sharing our passion. So a couple examples, I think it's Over on the left-hand side of the screen, we participate in lots of different events, both locally and then in the whole entire Midwest area, where we try to have public interactions, right, or reach out to consumers. Some examples of places, for example, if we are going to be opening a new sow farm, we'll try to have an open house, and we'll open it up to the public so people can come in and get a chance to see what does it look like on the inside of the farm before the pigs are there, so it's not quite as unknown to them. Other examples, we try to participate in agricultural days in different communities. For example, in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, we have the opportunity to connect with a lot of people in the public who maybe don't have a connection with agriculture or a connection on the farm, and we're able to bring pigs and calves and lambs to the middle of town, and they have the chance to visit with us about questions that they have about their food. We also, at the local county fairs and regional fairs, we've tried to support or even build from the ground up different birthing centers, right, where at the county fairs then people can come and get to see one of the coolest experiences, which is seeing little pigs being born or calves or lambs being born. We also try to reach out. Other examples would be going to like a Kiwanis club or the local Lions Club, any sort of event like that where we have the opportunity to interact again with the public, who some of them may have some ag exposure or agriculture experiences, but oftentimes there are a lot that don't. So it's just another way for us to connect. On the social media side, we've also had the opportunity to participate in a couple different events. One is called like the Oink outings, where that's specifically geared towards bloggers, and they come to the farms, and we actually get to show them the inside of the farm while the animals are there. And then the goal is that they would ask questions and interact with us, and hopefully we have that positive experience with them. We've shared our passion with them, connected with them emotionally, and then hopefully they will go out then and share what they've learned on their blog and kind of try to be the hands and feet then to pass the message on to the next consumer. And we've also done this through an event called Pass the Pork Blogger Dinner. So integrity, caring, and commitment so far, the three that I've talked about, lots of just basic examples of how we're trying to reach out and share our message, open our doors, and share our passion. The fourth core value that we share at Pipestone would be teamwork. And the important piece here that I want to emphasize is that we try to partner not only just within the swine industry, but also partnering with others in the agriculture communities, right? So whether it is on the egg production side, whether it's on the crop production side, whether it's the dairy side, we try to partner with all sectors of agriculture, because some of the challenges that we face that Justin and Tamika shared with us are not just on the swine side, right? It's related to all areas of food production. And so being able to partner with all those allies in agriculture is extremely important. I would also emphasize that we do try to partner and support choice, right? So even though for me as a mom, I have not chosen organic food, for example, for my family, I still, when talking to consumers or when working with other agriculture partners, I still show support for producers that are in agriculture or are trying some of those other choices that maybe are not choices I've made for my family. So that's really important for us to be able to share that. And then our last core value is growth. And we've all heard the saying that trust is not given, but it is earned, right? And we feel that in order for us to continue growing, it's really critical for us to have that trust, both from the consumers as well as from others in the industry or the agriculture community that we're partnering with. And we've found that that the two are connected, right? The more trust that we are able to gain, the more we are able to grow. And then by growing, you're also able to have maybe more opportunities to influence, connect, and earn some of that trust. And so there are definitely a lot of individuals that we try to partner with or team up with so that we can grow, especially in areas where we may not be the expert. And so it would be the same for you at your farms. If you guys aren't necessarily the expert in certain areas, find who you can partner with and grow with. For example, like on the legislative side, or in being an expert communicator, or even in how to work with or address certain situations that we hear about from activist groups. So I just have in the middle picture here would be of a group of farmers, farm families that came to us and said, hey, we don't necessarily want to do the sow farm thing anymore, but we would like you guys to help us manage that. And so that is a way that we continue to grow our business and then continue that cycle of earning trust. Others that we partner with too, just as an example, would be National Pork Producers Council and PPC, all of our local and state pork organizations, and then also individuals like Rick Berman who would help us on like the communication side, right? So the underlying foundation of trying to tell you this message today is really ultimately that we can't just be talking the talk. We also have to be able to walk the walk. And by that I mean being able to show and share that we do truly give expert pig care to the animals at our farm. And so both pieces are equally important. Both pieces on the talking piece as well as the walking piece, right? And so if we step back a minute and just focus on the talking piece, I would say it's if we do have the opportunity to try to talk the talk or go out and communicate to different groups, this involves making sure that we have either been through some coaching or some training and we are able to communicate our message, especially with all the fun facts that both Justin and Tamika shared with us, and being able to understand what does the consumer really want to hear, how can we connect with them. We want the consumers to be able to trust us and they have to feel our passion, right? Our word choice, the delivery, and then being able to demonstrate our passion are keys in building that consumer confidence. And one thing that people who I've had the privilege to work with who've helped train me, they've said it's very important to understand when we do have the opportunity to communicate with consumers, we don't want to go into it with a mentality that we're here to educate, right? Our goal is to share, specifically to share our passion and try to make that emotional connection. But if we go into it with the mentality that we're here to educate, it's kind of could be misconstrued as, I think you as the audience are unintelligent or dumb. And that is really starting your communication experience in a hole already, if you start out with that mentality. So if we can go into it saying that I'm here just to simply share my passion with you, that I think will make it a lot more of a successful experience and get you started with the opportunity to earn their trust. So that was the talking the talk piece. But the walking the walk piece, like I said, is also just as critical. Because once you have the opportunity to talk to consumer groups or to the public, you want to make sure that you are acting with integrity and you're able to share with them what you do on your farm. And so we at Pipestone try to help our producers be able to walk the walk by helping them have the best expert care that they can give to their pigs. We try to provide them with the best data through research and innovation, and then we also try to provide the best animal health for them and having really healthy animals. Like I said, we do this through sharing our knowledge. We have lots of opportunities where we try to work with producers with hands-on training, and then through lots of different research avenues and trying to come up with innovative or new tools that our producers can use just to make sure that they are able to give that best expert care. So I say all these things, but I also want to emphasize, and I think Justin and Tamika also touched on this, that we as pig farmers really need and love science, but I think that through their data, it is evident that the science piece probably isn't necessarily what the consumers or what the public wants to hear. In fact, I think it's fair to say that sometimes the consumer or the public will even either resent or reject or just flat out criticize the scientific piece of it. What they really want to know about is our passion, right? And how we live out that emotional connection that they want to have with us. So if we can try to keep the science piece of it to a minimum and just really understand how to connect with them through sharing our passion, that will get us a lot further along in the experience of earning their trust. So this is my last slide. These are my 2 girls and my husband, and we have sheep on our farm. And so the message or the point, what I've been trying to share with you today is just simply we all have ways that we can get involved in this consumer communication, right? And so it's important for all of us to search in our hearts and figure out what are we really good at? Is it speaking to a really large audience or maybe to a smaller group? Is it to just simply providing an animal to take to a local classroom so that they have exposure to agriculture? Or maybe supporting some sort of a local effort in your community, but being on the backside of the scene. We all need to really, truly be honest with ourselves and just figure out what is the best area where we can serve and start that consumer communication. And then once we truly reflect on that and figure it out, then just go out and do it, right? We need to all start getting involved. We all have something to share, whether it's through our time, our talents, or our treasures. And so as a mom, I would say, try to share that mom in you, because everybody knows that moms are very passionate about their kids, their family. And so we need to share that same message about what we do on the farm. Thank you.
Well, thank you, panelists. Fantastic job, and I know I have lots of questions, but more importantly, for the audience at this point in time, this is your opportunity to ask questions. I think it's appropriate to raise the lights at this time, and we have about 15 to 20 minutes, and so I would encourage you as panelists to ask questions. You have several ways of doing that. You can direct your question to someone specifically on the panel, if you choose, and or if you just want to open the question for the general 3 panelists that are up front, you can do that as well. So it's always the hardest to be the first person to ask the question. Panelists, I'll give you the wireless mic so that you can engage in the conversation. So who would like to ask the first question? Feel free. Okay, feel free.
So I'll ask the question of Dr. Odland. So when you go out and you show young babies and you're talking to consumers and you have really awesome ideas, how do you make the connection back to the farm, that building, that big building that's raising all those pigs and it's a factory? I mean, how do you bring that message?
That's a great question. I think, again, if we can start at least by getting them to understand on the small scale, so by being able to take 1 or 2 animals into the classroom or something like that, and then share with them, this is talking through with them what we do on a day-to-day basis. It's just the same stuff that maybe they've heard either about what their grandparents did or what they read about in the books, and just being able to share just the basic things like, yeah, we feed them, we take care of them, we make sure that they're comfortable, and again, emphasizing here's a small, cute pig. I think then you can share with them yes, this is what we do inside the barn. It's not scary, and then hopefully we can also open it up to if we have like one of those open houses, or if we're able to take a class into one of our barns and start showing them then on the larger scale, what we do. So just kind of use that, I guess, as a starting point, but then hopefully have the opportunity to continue that conversation either at the farm or through pictures, different things like that.
Excellent. Next question. Yes, sir.
This is for Tamika. Do I see some inconsistencies in GMO data? There seems to be concern, then there's not concern, and they read the science and they're less concerned.
Yes.
Science still refused.
Yes. So we started asking specifically about GMOs last year because the term started becoming more popular as far as in social media and news stories. Previously, we were saying just biotechnology. When you say biotechnology, I think what consumers hear primarily is technology, and technology is a good thing. But the term GMOs, you're correct, the term GMOs really turns consumers off. They're I don't want to say scared, but they shy away from it. And so there has been more of a push in industry to offer non-GMO products to meet consumer demand. But when we ask the question about GMOs, there's so many other things before GMOs that I think that's why you see a skew as far as the consumer if they have a multiple choice, they'll pick the other things, natural, organic, no pesticides, all those other things before the GMOs. So I think what we are dealing with is that there's a subset of consumers that, a smaller set of consumers that are concerned with GMOs. There's a large set of consumers that don't know what GMOs are, but the term turns them off in some way. But there's so many other things that they do know. Well, they know what natural means. I like natural. They know organic. I like organic. I mean, because they've been kind of taught that these things are healthier. And so we have a consumer that's more concerned with their health. And so all these choices are more linked with their health. And because I think there's so many consumers that don't really know what GMOs are, they're like, it could maybe not have that much impact on my health, so, they're just kind of about it. So, yeah.
So I was going to ask too, don't they lump GMOs into like if it's organic or natural, if it isn't, GMO, if it isn't pesticide, if it's humanely raised, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think there's some consumers that know that organic means that it's also going to be non-GMO. But there's a lot of consumers that don't know what GMO, again, they don't know what GMO means. They don't know that there's only a handful of things are even offered in a GMO counterpart. And so when you see these labels with non-GMO project, the little butterfly, they think that they're getting a better product somehow. They think that they're getting a healthier product somehow. But it's a lack of education. And to Carissa's point, I think that we strive to try to educate the consumer, but you can't say, well, I'm going to educate you. But GMOs is one of those things that the information, there's a lot of misinformation out there on GMOs. But they are concerned, but there's so many more that aren't concerned and they don't know what it is, and they're like, I'll just go with what's natural because I know that I've heard that that's good for me. I'll just go with what's organic. I've heard that that's good for me. So yeah.
Yes, feel free.
So a couple that I'll start with the first one. So you mentioned that they say that their trusted sources are a healthcare professional, like a dietitian, or reading scientific article. Do you ask a follow-up question in the survey about when was the last time they actually had a conversation about food with a healthcare professional? I'm just really skeptical.
Yes.
Right, but consumers
Yeah.
always say, oh yeah, I go to the experts.
Yeah.
and the e-zines, and that's not for veterinarians.
Right.
They're not really.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, you're right.
I'm just wondering if you had any sort of qualitative insight into that gap between what they say and what.
Yeah, well, so last year how we asked the question, it was just one question. It was, who do you consider a reliable source to get your information on food and beverage purchases? And RDs were high in the ranking. Healthcare professional was high in the ranking. We didn't have a separate question to say, but is that who you go to? So that's why we had the two questions this year to say, well, who do you consider a trusted source? Oh, yeah, an RD, a healthcare professional, da-da-da-da-da. But when you ask the second question, who do you actually go to, you see that RDs actually fell down to maybe fifth in that list. Who do you go to? Well, people could say, well, yeah, I go to the doctor. They go to the doctor, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. And we know that many healthcare professionals are not trained nutritionists or RDs, so they don't really give nutrition information. They may say, oh, you may want to cut down on your sugar, or you may want to cut down on this, but they're not going to give you that in-depth nutrition information. And so that's why we asked the two separate questions. So you're right. They say that this is the best source to get the information from, but that's likely not who they're going to get the information. So friends and family rose to number 2 in that slot as far as, being a source that's most visited as far as getting information from. So yeah, we were skeptical last year too, because we were like, who goes to the RD, all the time or regularly? No one.
I believe your question was multi-tiered, so feel free to follow up.
That's the other part of the panel. So do you have $1 million to spend to create a voice and Tamika, where would you put it? Would you put it with waters? Would you put it with, national park board? I'm just, because I think it's pretty clear that we need to create a bigger voice. We have a lot of small conversations going on, but we're not having a huge impact on the consumer perceptions yet. For $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, where would you start?
And that's for anyone on the panel, Dr. Ransom.
I'll take your $1 million. I was going to say, actually, I give it to Carissa. I think it's really about $1 million, just for perspective. The amount of money that these large QSRs spend on marketing would blow your mind. $1 billion a year for one company, okay? So $1 million is just scratching it. It really, in my opinion, you've got to create a collective movement within production agriculture about telling a story that you believe in. And we definitely need to find an advocate that is a superstar already that can talk on our behalf. But most likely that advocate doesn't want to take the risk of jeopardizing their brand, because they've got a multi-million-dollar brand that feeds them every night. So it's a tricky thing. I mean, in my opinion, the work that Carissa and others are doing in terms of collectively telling a grassroots movement is incredibly important. I think the challenge is the great work she is doing is in the states that they have hogs, and it's not in the coasts and the cities where we need the biggest help. So.
Which actually is interesting. So we've been talking about this within our company lately, and somebody threw out a really crazy idea to try to have a group of individuals that would be, again, supportive of all the different ag, options, right? Not just trying to push one specific agenda, but just to have a broad message, and to literally just do like a tour along the East Coast and the West Coast. And I know it might sound a little bit silly, but especially trying to maybe highlight like some of the universities, right, or colleges, and try to get some of the messaging out to the younger generation, because hopefully then that's where maybe we can have some more impact. Obviously, we'd have to look at Tamika's data and figure out, you know, where's the population that we can have the most impact, but then just to try to at least make that connection with one step, and then hopefully have them feel like they can go out and continue to share that message. Because to your point, I mean, we can't do it all ourselves, you know, so you got to find somebody that you can share your passion with, and then hopefully they're willing to share their passion too.
We have time for one more question. If someone has a burning question that they'd like to ask, and if not, I'm going to ask one. But I want to make sure we entertain your questions first. You seem comfortable. So, Dr. Ransom, I'm going to put you on the hot seat for a moment and allow you to answer this final question, keeping in mind where you and I were trained and the degrees we were trained in. And as I talk about Dr. Ransom, who is the former Senior Director of Quality Systems for U.S. Supply Chain at McDonald's, addressed to the crowd at times, my frustration, I guess, personally and professionally, is that I feel like some of the organizations, such as one that you were priorly involved in, make decisions not based on fact, not based on science. Right. And sometimes I feel the vocal minority can push position within the food system. So please share with the audience a little bit your philosophy around that.
Well, I don't know if it's my philosophy. I don't work there anymore. So the reality is you have vocal minorities, right? So you have detractors and you have supporters. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. 60% of the people in the middle, they really don't know much, and they don't really care that much, right? You have a vocal minority that are over here really promoting agriculture, food production systems, foodies, if you will, and then you have a vocal set of detractors. And whenever the detractors are trying to sway that 60%, when they start stealing that 60%, and they're skewing the information, it becomes very sensitive for brands. Don't screw with my 60%, okay? Because they want to protect their advocates, and they want to protect the people in the middle. And whenever the detractors are starting to bring things into question, maybe it forces you to question, is there a different way to look at this? Is there a different way to raise pigs or chickens or dairy cows? Is there a different way to grow crops more sustainably? It forces really good conversations. So rather than getting defensive, and sometimes you can fight it. I mean, my job previously was to sit with NGOs from as far left as far, the very left side and the very right side. And we were never making anybody happy. But the reality is we were trying to understand the issues and trying to move forward for what we thought was the right thing for our brand. And you really have to take all those things in mind and figure out what's the right thing going forward. A couple of months ago, years ago, I guess rather, I spoke at a big pork congress in Wisconsin, summer congress, whatever it is, and my big thing there was we've got to figure out how to move forward on group house sows, right? It's a touchy issue. It changes the way everything looks. And that's not a decision I made, but whenever you go, and if you didn't grow up in that environment and you go and look at these different kinds of production systems, it's really difficult to take a TV camera behind you and say, this is my brand and this is what I want you to buy when you're looking at sows and stalls. Brands just won't do it because they don't feel good about it. And I realize that's how we evolved, but it's a touchy issue, and I think it's really about how do we look at both sides and try to find the right way forward.
Thank you, Dr. Ransom. Appreciate your transparency. A couple things as we're closed here. Please give the panelists a big round of applause for their efforts today. Also, I'd like to thank you for coming and being in attendance. And if I could just share some summation of what I've learned a little bit today, that if we can walk through that door in our mind of the last hour and a half of learning is, go back to Dr. Ransom's Henry Ford quote back on the screen. And don't think about it as horses and automobiles, but think about it as production agriculture. And where are we headed from a futuristic perspective? And although we are very advanced, especially in swine systems, there's opportunities, I think, to think differently about what we currently do. The other thing is that I learned is let's talk about engaging our customer. Okay, thank you, Dr. Odland. In terms of education, I think we really want to engage in a customer conversation. And the final thing I would tell you is, back to some of the demographics that were shared early on by Dr. Ransom, this whole idea of a unified voice together, creating a larger microphone to speak from, I think is imperative for the future of our industry. So with that, enjoy the World Pork Expo, and thank you for being here.